Hello and welcome. My name is Retro, and today I am here for the Lotus Eaters update. I have decided that I wanted to do this new thing where each time an update for Warframe comes out, I want to basically sit here and explain briefly what all the new content is, and maybe even talk about some of the stuff that you might want to consider going after and grinding for first. However, I honestly had to consider if I was even going to make this video for the Lotus Eaters because of the lack of actually any new content in this update, but I decided to say, hey, why not? So, as I already said, there is not a lot of new content in this update, which I very much expected. Honestly, it is mostly what I expected it to be, which was literally just a Prime Access, which is basically what it is. Lotus Eaters is really just a fancy name for Serdagoth Prime Access. However, for some reason, at the same time, I'm still disappointed. Even though it really did meet my expectations of basically no content, I'm somehow still disappointed by the fact that it's basically no content. But hey, whatever. So, what did we get in this update? Well, basically, the main thing we got, obviously, is the Lotus Eaters quest. Well, prologue. So it is a prologue quest, not a full quest. This means we're talking stuff like the Chimera prologue and also the 3 prologues to war. So very short, very quick. This one is especially quick. You can honestly get through it in like 3 minutes, maybe even 2 minutes. Like, it is a very quick duration of a quest. It is a prologue. I wasn't expecting anything from it, to be fair. I honestly expected it to be a cool cutscene like some of the prologue to war quests, which this one isn't as much. But I'm not going to talk about what actually happens in the prologue. You should go ahead and play it yourself, because it will be a prerequisite for Warframe 1999, so you definitely have to go and do the prologue. The next thing that came in this update is now whenever you get a former drop from a relic, if it's an uncommon drop on the relic drop table, it will actually drop 2 blueprints instead of 1. So common former drops will drop 1 blueprint, and the uncommon ones, the silver ones, will drop 2 former blueprints. This is actually an amazing addition to the game, and I'm honestly surprised it took them this long to happen. Apparently, the only reason why this happened is because someone went up to, I believe, Pablo at TennoCon itself and basically made him agree to doing this change on the spot. So, good job to whoever that person is. You've done an amazing job for us all. And that's literally it. Besides Serdagoth Prime access though. No new weapons, no arcanes, mons, nothing. Literally nothing. Except for Serdagoth Prime Access. So that's what most of this video will obviously be about. So let's get straight into it. So Serdagoth Prime Access is actually probably the best Prime Access in terms of the new primes we've gotten. Maybe even ever. And it's not because of Sevagoth, but it's actually because of Epitaph and Nautilus, specifically because of Verglass. Because Epitaph and Verglass are both meta weapons even before they have primes, and Nautilus is also a very good, one of the best companions in the game. So we have 3 of meta, if not very high up there, new items that weren't primed before, now all primes. So obviously they're going to be even more better. So that's a big deal. Serdagoth has also actually become one of the better nukers in the game now, thanks to his 2 new augments. So Serdagoth Prime is also very cool, and personally I think his skin looks very dope. I will be releasing a video for a build guide on Serdagoth, and in that video, I will also be showing builds for every single item that came in this Prime Access. So obviously, if you are interested in seeing my builds for Serdagoth and all the other items in this Prime Access, go check that out once it is released. It'll be a few days from now when I release it, but it is coming. So let's actually go through and explain what is new with the primes that we got and what buffs they received. Starting with, obviously, Serdagoth. So, typically, we all know when a Warframe gets a prime, it doesn't really make a difference. They do get a buff in stats, but it's a pretty minimum buff, and so we don't really care about it that much. They are better, but not to a significant amount. The buffs that Serdagoth got was he does have more shields now, so at level 30, he normally had 335 shields, now he has 370. He has higher armor, he has 185 armor versus 160. And his energy has now gone up to 225, instead it was 190 on his previous version. He also obviously has a higher starting energy, but that just comes with the increased energy. His whole kit, though, did get quite a lot of extra polarities. He himself got an additional Naramon polarity. His Shadow got 2 extra polarities of a Naramon and a Vazarin polarity. If you don't know what this is, Neramon polarities are the dash polarities, Vazarin polarities are the D polarities, and then his claws, his prime exalted weapon, got an additional 3 Matarai polarities, which are the B polarities, which is amazing because Matarai is really the only polarity you ever want on a melee, mostly because there are very few good non-Matarai melee mods, actually. However, I'm actually quite disappointed with Sethergoth Prime. Not only does Sethergoth still not have an aura polarity, which is just annoying, but also the fact that his Shadow didn't get any buffs at all really disappoints me. Right now, Sethergoth is in a really bad state when it comes to his Shadow, because Sethergoth himself is just miles ahead of the Shadow. Sethergoth is a much, much, much better Warframe than his Shadow is, to the point where you shouldn't even, if you don't even need to invest into the Shadow at all, or the Shadow claws, because you can only use the claws when you're in the Shadow, because you're gonna have better results with just base Sethergoth, which to me seems like it's backwards. And one of the biggest issues with the Shadow and why it takes a lot of investment to get him going is because he has terrible survivability in terms of his base stats. He does have a pretty decent and pretty high amount of armor, but he has basically no shields. I actually think he has the lowest shield in the game, even below Daggett and Nezha, and he also has very little health. And he also suffers from issues like Arcane Blessing not really working very well on him because of the way the Shadow works and how it gets reset when you have to go back into it and all this stuff. So it's actually he's actually very squishy. So I was really hoping they actually gave the Shadow quite a substantial buff to its health mostly. And it's not like and I understand they clearly decided not to buff the Shadow at all because it is an Exalted and they don't normally buff Exalteds, but they do have a precedent to buffing a Prime Exalted, as Garuda's Prime Talons are actually better and buffed from the regular version. And also the fact that it's a exalted Warframe made me think that you would actually see some buffs for it. So I am actually pretty disappointed that the Shadow didn't get any buffs at all. The Shadow's claws I didn't expect to get a buff. I'm fine with them not getting a buff. They are exalted. Exalteds don't normally get buffs, as I said, so that's fine. But I did wish the Shadow got a buff as well, which it did not. Honestly, as I said, Sethergoth is quite a good nuker, but as far as the items that came in this Prime Access, Sethergoth is definitely the worst part of the Prime Access. I would encourage going after his companion and secondary that also came with the Prime Access. So moving straight on to the secondary, we have Epitaph Prime. So why would I encourage you going to get Epitaph Prime basically immediately? Well, to begin with, Epitaph is the best primer in the game. The reason why is because it has a very high status chance, just like the Kuvanu Core, and also it is a pretty decently big AoE, allowing you to have hit a lot of enemies with a single shot to cover a wide range of enemies with status effects. But more than anything, and the reason why it's better than the Kuvanu Core, which is another really good primer, is because Epitaph force procs cold. This means you can have both viral and cold. And if you're running a crit build, which you would be on basically every weapon, using viral and cold will give you 2 different buffs to your damage on top of applying status effects for effects like CO and Gun CO. Sure, you can have magnetic and viral on Kuvanu Core because of the lich system, which is very good, but personally I also think the Epitaph is much nicer to play with, so I would definitely say Epitaph is a better primer. Kuvanu Core is still a fantastic primer, but I would say Epitaph is better because of the cold force procs. Because cold is actually a very good status effect right now. You just never would want to have it over viral, but now with Epitaph you can have both. So with Epitaph you actually have 2 gun modes. You have the charge shot, which fires a single target without an AoE, which has high crit chance. And the buffs we got to the charge shot is the base damage is higher, and the crit chance has gone from 48% to 50%, so it has a slight increase there. Crit multiplier is now at 3 times instead of 2.6, so a good increase there. Status chance has jumped up quite a decent amount from 4% all the way to 14%. And those are all the buffs we have to the charge shot. However, you don't really use Epitaph for the charge shot, you would really use Epitaph for the uncharged shot, and unsurprisingly, the uncharged shot hasn't received that many buffs, which isn't surprising because Epitaph is already such an amazing primer because of its uncharged AoE shot, so I didn't expect the E to really buff it, making it that much better. What it did get go is higher base damage, which doesn't really matter because you use it for priming, higher base critical chance, which doesn't matter because you use it for priming, and higher base critical multiplier, which doesn't matter because you use it for priming. Higher base damage is a good thing though for any heat inherent build, so that's very good. The big bonus that Epitaph Prime gives though, however, is the range of the AoE has now gone from 8 meters to 10 meters, which might not seem very large, but a AoE increase for the gun at all is really big because its skill when it comes to priming comes from its AoE. So the fact that it has an increase in its AoE range just means the prime is going to be that much better of a primer than the regular version, so I do highly encourage you to go after the prime. We have the Nautilus Prime. Nautilus is, again, just like with the Warframe, the buffs to Nautilus isn't really anything special. Its shields now sit at 350 instead of 250, and its armor has now jumped up to 175 instead of 80. So it has basic buffs to increase. However, I would highly encourage you to get Nautilus Prime, not for Nautilus Prime, but because of Verglas Prime, which is the Sentinel weapon that you get with Nautilus Prime. And I'll get into more of that when we talk about Verglas Prime. But Nautilus is also one of the best companions in the game because of Cordon, which is one of its preset mods which groups enemies together. So definitely could recommend getting Nautilus Prime, especially because Nautilus Prime will actually be easier to get than regular Nautilus. And also because you'll get that Verglas Prime, which I highly recommend getting. And now we do have Verglas Prime. So what does Verglas do? What's it all about? Why is it so good? So Verglas is really the only Sentinel weapon that is capable of any reliable form of DPS. Not only is it the best when it comes to DPS, it's the only one at all, really. And the reason why that's so good is for any setup which you want to kill enemies, like with Duplex Bond, mainly with a orb generator death cube build. What Verglas does is it's a weapon with a decently low crit chance, but a very high status chance, and it is a beam weapon, so it applies status pretty quickly, and it is very good with a viral setups, viral heat setups. It does have inherent cold damage and nothing else. So the weapon does do the prime version is increased base damage, which obviously is just going to mean more damage. It does have an increased crit chance and crit multiplier. This doesn't matter too much, as I wouldn't encourage modding for crit chance on Verglas even after these changes, but there's still definitely a buff to the weapon anyway, and an increased status chance from 34% to 36%. And like I said, its DPS mainly comes from a viral heat setup, so this plus the base damage increase it gets, it's just a boon to its damage across the board. So definitely recommend getting Verglas Prime. Verglas's base version is definitely more than capable of killing enemies, but Verglas Prime is just going to be that extra bit better, and it is definitely the meta, not even the only Sentinel weapon for DPS. So that's everything that came with the Lotus Eaters update. Like I said, I am working on 3 Sevagoth builds, which will also show off builds for every other item that came in this Prime Access. So that video will be coming out within the near future, so do stick around and wait for that. And if you want to check out some of my other videos, please do, that I would really appreciate it. And also please subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed the video. Leave me a like and give me some comments. Were you disappointed about the length of the quest? Did you like the quest? What were your thoughts in general about the quest? And also, are you really excited for this update? Are you a fan of Sevagoth? And anything really that you want to talk about, please talk about it in my comment section below. Anyway, until next time, bye-bye.